Discover 4 shocking fruits to avoid. After 60 and 4 incredible ones to transform your health daily. Helen stood in her small kitchen, the familiar aroma of cinnamon and sugar lingering in the air. It was comforting, a heartwarming reminder of decades spent at her husband's bakery. The hours blurred together, each day a sweet reassurance wrapped in pastry. Yet, as her hands kneaded the dough, the weight of loneliness crept in like a shadow, enveloping her. She flicked off the mixer, feeling weary despite the sugary indulgence she allowed herself, the memory of her husband, both a balm and a weight. The thought of her estranged sister, Marie, filled her with unease. After years of silence, she was suddenly back in town, radiating a vibrancy Helen had long abandoned. Despite the excitement of reconnecting, trepidation bubbled up in her chest. The bakery represented everything her family once was, a symphony of sweet notes and baked delights that filled her home with warmth. Marie was a nutritionist now, preaching a lifestyle that felt foreign to Helen. Would their reunion provoke a reckoning for her choices? A tightness in her throat warned her that the sisterly banter might not be without conflict. The grocery store, alive with energy, swirled with the sense of ripe fruits. Marie observed the fresh produce with a discerning eye, while Helen felt outdated, a relic clinging to her past. Marie picked up a shrunken melon, scolding it as a forbidden fruit, and rattling off names of others that would somehow transform her diet if only Helen would embrace change. The tone was earnest, yet Helen's defenses sprang up like a fortress. "I have my ways," she snapped, but inside, her mind raced. Could her fondness for pastries be keeping her chained to an empty existence? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Frantically, Helen recalled the checkout line. Marie declared that the oranges and avocados were filled with healing properties, leaving Helen feeling hollow as each description echoed through her mind. The frustration simmered, often morphing to guilt. The bakery had been a love letter to her family, yet now it felt like a cage. Those images of laughter amongst buttery croissants mocked her burgeoning desire for change, amplifying her internal conflict. As Marie turned toward her, there was a shining conviction in her eyes that both spoke to Helen's heart and challenged her own choices. A quiet desperation built within her. Having spent years indulging in sweet memories while neglecting her own health, she felt unmoored from her identity as the pastry queen of Maplewood. What bit of her would remain if she let go? The sisters' bickering brought forth hidden frustrations, blended with a longing every bit palpable. Each girl clinging to their stories, unaware of the course they were charting together. Helen faced her sister and questioned if she could willingly undo decades of flavor for a fleeting essence of vitality. Each fruit Marie introduced became a poignant reminder of life's choices and the walls Helen had constructed. Tension wove through their conversation, and the air tightened with unsaid words. Would she risk leaving her bakery's sweetness behind? Would she ever be ready for the transformation waiting at the edge of her comfort zone? Helen stood resolute yet trembling, caught between two worlds as the warmth of her husband's memory slipped to the forefront. Ultimately, the looming tension left her staring at a new horizon that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The question echoed in her heart during the silence that followed. Could she truly embrace the future without her beloved bakery? In the dim light of the bakery, familiarity clung to the air, wrapping around Helen like a well-worn shawl. She stood before the battered countertop, her fingers tracing the grain as if it were the surface of a map guiding her toward lost destinations. The morning sunlight filtered through the window, casting warm patterns on the flour-dusted surface, yet it did little to alleviate the chill that settled in her chest. It was as if she were piecing together a jigsaw with missing parts, some irretrievable. With each passing day since Marie's return, Helen felt the clang of conflict ringing louder in her ears, amplified by her own undeniable truths. Store aisles brimming with colorful produce called to her, taunting her with potential. Yet the tantalizing aroma of fresh-baked bread still held her captive, anchoring her to a past that was no longer just sweet, but suffocating. Her routine remained unbroken, yet each moment spent baking felt duplicitous, like a lie wrapped in buttery layers. Today, however, something shifted. Her sister's relentless enthusiasm fought against her inertia. "Maybe I should try something new," she muttered, half to herself. Henpecked by indecision, she summoned a search for flavors beyond her comfort zone. Would it be the avocados Marie had praised for their heart-healthy fats? Or would it be a handful of vibrant berries bursting with antioxidants? The thought both intrigued and frightened her. Would indulging in these unfamiliar tastes tear apart the fabric of who she had been? As she prepped the dough, the comforting ritual felt like a confrontation more than a labor of love. Helen paused, close enough to hear the silent stirrings of her heart. Could she align the bakery's fragrance with a fresh essence? A compromise, perhaps? Observing the rich hues of fruits laid out on the counter, an unexpected determination formed. Maybe this could be more than an escape. This could be a rebirth. The soft chime of the bakery bell broke her reverie, heralding the arrival of familiar faces. Regulars filed in, those who'd shared moments of joy and tormented periods cushioned with her pastries. Each smile that greeted her felt weighted now, and the thought pierced her core. Were they just reminders of her past? That past she had to unravel before embracing a new future? She turned to serve a group of patrons, attempting to mask the swirling storm within. Each compliment sewn to her heart felt like an anchor, yet a tempest brewed beneath. Loneliness had become an unwelcome companion. It lingered when laughter faded away, when the shop emptied for the evening, and the silence echoed louder than the conversations she had once cherished. And just as Helen set down a fresh loaf, her thoughts returned to Marie. A thought cut through. Her sister had faced a similar struggle, shifting her career from a conventional path into the uncharted territories of health and well-being. Was there a way for Helen to adapt without losing herself? At that moment, the decision formed harder than the still cooling loaf. Both sisters needed to bend like branches, reaching out for fruit not only to nourish the body, but to sustain the bond between them. The realization struck Helen like a bolt of warm light. A flicker of excitement began to overshadow the self-doubt that once blindsided her. This could be a journey together, not of division, but of reconciliation and growth. A co-creation of experiences rather than past injuries. Yet as she took a tentative step back towards her familiar realm, a question lingered. How would she introduce her beloved pastries to a spectrum of health? The professional identity she had curated for decades stood on shaky ground, and a new avenue demanded to be explored. In that moment of understanding, Helen grasped that transformation did not equate to abandonment. Instead, it unfolded a new narrative. If she could infuse her passion for baking with a fresh vision for health, there lay the prospect of a hybrid identity emerging, not merely the pastry queen, but a culinary artist reimagining sweetness. As she prepared to close the shop for the night, the weight of possibility filled the air. Was she ready to combine her loves into one? The thought brought both fear and curiosity, a dance of opposites that encouraged her to craft something anew. The door creaked as she locked up, leaving the bakery behind for her evening reflection. With the sun setting in a burst of apricot hues, Helen understood. Doors weren't just to be closed. Sometimes they were simply thresholds to be crossed. Would she dare step through? The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the evening sky with vibrant strokes, a canvas infusing Helen's heart with a sense of anticipation. She stood still for a moment outside the bakery, her breath mingling with the cool night air. The world felt large and daunting, like an uncharted territory waiting for her to navigate. She could taste the sweetness of possibilities mingling with the bitterness of her fears, and in that moment, clarity emerged. The daring dance between nostalgia and innovation had to begin. At home, the kitchen lights glowed like distant stars in the vastness of her thoughts. Helen unpacked her satchel, unearthing doodles hastily scribbled on notepaper. Ideas for new pastries that didn't just cling to tradition, but inspired a fresh narrative. Her sister's voice echoed, urging her to embrace change, to experiment, to play. "Start with something simple," she whispered to herself, examining the assortment of fruits she had gathered. Bananas, vibrant berries, butternut squash, all sat on the counter, reminding her of other ways to infuse her pastries with health. Each ingredient held its unique story, yet she felt the strong pull toward creating a new one altogether. Flour dust danced in the air as Helen kneaded the dough, her fingers moving with purpose. The ritual, once automatic, transformed into an exploration. With each fold and movement, she questioned, what texture would vibrant blueberries offer? How might the creaminess of ripe avocados meld into a delightful cake? The thought both exhilarated and unsettled her. What if her loyal patrons, those accustomed to the sweet symphony of her traditional pastries, rejected her culinary adventures? The weight of their expectations felt heavy, but the possibility of creating something revolutionary urged her forward. She paused, inhaling the soothing scent of rising dough. This was her art, one that transcended mere ingredients. It was about connection, nourishment, and evolution. She turned to her recipe book, each page a repository of her personal journey. Recipes etched in flour and love lay open, but tonight she reached for a blank page, a canvas upon which to draw her new identity. Inspiration coursed through her veins. Helen envisioned merging old favorites with her newfound focus, perhaps a berry tart infused with almond glaze, or what about a banana bread flavored with nutrient-rich chia seeds? Her heart raced in rhythm with her excitement. Late into the night, the flicker of candlelight illuminated both the kitchen and her thoughts. Plans took root, each one branching out into new ideas, concocting a vision for her bakery that enveloped her hopes, health-conscious yet indulgent, innovative yet familiar. Helen was no longer just a baker. She was becoming a creator, a pioneer, forging a bridge between past loves and future endeavors. As fatigue crept in, she leaned back against the counter, searching for clarity amidst the chaos of new concepts swirling in her mind. The world outside felt at odds with her internal revelations, yet she knew she was on the precipice of transformation. Yet, would her patrons embrace these changes or mourn the loss of their familiar indulgences? In the quiet solitude of the night, Helen's thoughts coalesced into a pressing truth. The journey of innovation required courage. It was a challenge not just of ingredients, but of identity. The door to her bakery might be a threshold to step through, but it was not merely about crossing over. It was about whether she could invite others to step with her. With rest on the horizon, Helen drafted a vision in her mind, contemplating the first new recipe she would introduce. A bold move, uncertain yet exuberant. Tomorrow would not only mean bringing health into her bakery, but also confronting the inevitable whispers of doubt. Amidst that swirl of ambition and anxiety, a sense of determination gripped her. It was time to discover whether her past could harmonize with a bright, bold future. The next day, she would confront the true test, sharing her vision with her patrons. Would they join her in embracing this newfound fusion, or reject her evolution? The answer loomed just out of reach, but she could sense the thrill of the journey that lay ahead. In the soft light of early morning, Helen awoke with a jolt, her dreams steeped in vivid colors of fresh fruits and pastries yet to be baked. The kitchen hummed with unseen energy, urging her to move. Today wasn't merely a continuation of her journey. It was the dawn of a new chapter, one that called for her to step into the unknown with both excitement and trepidation. As she brewed her coffee, Helen mentally rehearsed her proclamation to the loyal patrons who entered her bakery each day, their familiar faces alight with anticipation. What would they say when she unveiled her creations? A swirl of doubt tightened her stomach, a familiar adversary whispering, "How will they take change?" But she pushed those thoughts aside, forcing her focus back on the ingredients lining the counter. Today was about courage and clarity, not just for her vision, but for herself. She began preparing her first new creation, a vibrant berry almond tart. The almond meal spoke of health without sacrificing flavor. The berries promised a burst of freshness. Yet, with each precise movement, sifting flour, mixing, folding butter, she could feel her resolve simmering. Her hands moved instinctively, but her mind was a riot of thoughts. What would she say? Should she keep it simple and let them taste before revealing her full plans? Or would that be a half measure? Each question felt like a weight pressing against her aspirations, pushing her deeper into uncertainty. The words started to crystallize in her mind, forming a speech she would practice in front of the mirror later, an orator with a mission. I'm not just changing recipes, I'm offering a broader understanding of what indulgence means. But each time she rehearsed it, another voice countered, but what if they miss the old flavors? Finally, the moment arrived. The door swung open, and the scent of buttery pastries blended with coffee filled the air as the first few customers strolled in, their greetings cheerful, yet her heart raced with a different rhythm. The day-to-day chatter felt like a backdrop, a soft whisper of how things used to be, but her resolve stood firm. She presented the tart, awaiting their reactions with bated breath. Faces lit up as they took their first bite, and the explorers in their eyes ignited something within her. Yet beyond their immediate delight, she noticed one person's furrowed brow, Mrs. Langley, a long-time customer whose unwavering fondness for traditional chocolate croissants could silence a room. Helen's pulse quickened. Mrs. Langley was a touchstone to her past, to the very essence of her bakery, and if she hesitated, it might spell disaster. The woman chewed slowly, the rhythm of her deliberation amplifying Helen's rising anxiety. "What do you think?" Helen managed, her voice steady despite the chaos churning in her chest. Mrs. Langley's gaze met Helen's, and time slowed. "It's intriguing, dear, but—" The hesitation loomed ominously. "It's different." Determination flared in Helen. Different can be delightful. What if we redefine what indulgence means? The words slipped out as if they were meant to always be spoken. Helen could feel the stakes surge. To win over Mrs. Langley would mean more than just approval. It would mean validating her new identity as a baker who dared to innovate. But would different be enough? Helen's spirits soared alongside uncertainty as she awaited Mrs. Langley's reply, her life hanging in the balance between the familiar and the daring. She steeled herself, knowing this moment could set the tone for not just her bakery's future, but her own development in navigating personal and professional spaces. As customers began to respond warmly to the tart, she turned back to Mrs. Langley, her heart steadying. The air was electric, waiting for the verdict that would steer her pathway forward or send her tumbling back into the shadows of self-doubt. The choice lay not only with the patrons, but ultimately within her. Was she prepared to carry this new vision forward, confronting not only the doubts of others, but her own deeper fears lurking beneath? The answer shimmered at the edge of her resolve, and she braced herself for the moment of truth. Helen's breath hung in the air, a tangible blend of hope and anxiety. The room buzzed with the delight of her customers, flavors bridging the divide between tradition and innovation. Yet, her focus was locked on Mrs. Langley, as if the world around them had faded into a blurred backdrop. The moment stretched, taut with possibility. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed, searching for something within Helen's earnest gaze. The silence swelled, filling the bakery with an intensity that could almost be tasted alongside the sweet aromas wafting from the counter. "May I ask what inspired this?" Mrs. Langley finally inquired, her voice measured, an invitation to delve beyond the surface. A question intended to peel back layers. Helen felt its weight settle in her chest. "I wanted to create something that embraces flavors without compromising health," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Baked goods don't have to be indulgent in a harmful way." "Oh dear," Mrs. Langley mused, taking another bite. "But some of us need a little indulgence to savor life." "There's room for both," Helen asserted, her determination rising like the dough she kneaded each morning. "We can enjoy balance." Mrs. Langley nodded slowly, her brow easing, but her earlier skepticism lingered. "Balance, indeed. But it sounds like you're seeking to redefine what indulgence means entirely." Helen seized the moment. "Exactly. I believe we can lead a life filled with indulgence while also embracing a healthier approach. It doesn't have to be one or the other." As she spoke, Helen felt something shift within her, a flicker of confidence igniting as her proposal resonated. She wasn't just offering pastries. She was advocating for a shift in perspective about enjoyment and self-care. The taste-testing crowd murmured their approval, their eagerness piercing through the tension. "You've given us a new way to think about dessert," one customer chimed in, echoing a sentiment Helen had desperately hoped for. Encouraged, Helen took a deep breath and stepped further toward Mrs. Langley. "Would you be open to sharing more about what you value in your desserts? Perhaps we can redefine indulgence together." The interaction shifted. Helen felt she was no longer just defending her choices, but paving a road of collaboration. The exchange became less about proving her point and more about learning, allowing her to confront her fear of rejection instead with an invitation to dialogue. Mrs. Langley's expression softened, and Helen glimpsed the woman's decades of wisdom. "Perhaps," she said, "if we can blend flavors from the past with this new approach, we can keep the spirit of your bakery alive while embracing change." Excitement blossomed in Helen's chest. The path forward was beginning to reveal itself, not as a solitary journey, but as a partnership built on respect for the old and curiosity for the new. Helen acknowledged the weight of that conversation. It was a significant moment in her growth. She wasn't merely a baker facilitating transactions. She was a facilitator of connection, guiding her patrons through their own journeys of transformation. "All right then," she smiled, her heart now a steady drumbeat of possibility. "Let's explore this change together. How about a collaboration on a special pastry?" "Now that," Mrs. Langley said, her eyes twinkling, "is the kind of indulgence I can get behind." The buzz returned, stronger now, as other customers leaned in, suddenly invested in their conversation. Helen felt the atmosphere shift, felt it align with her aspirations. She had turned a moment of potential rejection into a cornerstone of collaboration. Still, the day was young, and the end was not yet in sight. Helen found herself pondering. How could she further cultivate this newfound partnership with her customers? What challenges still lay ahead as she navigated the intricate interplay of heritage and innovation? Driven by the promise of growth and open to whatever awaited her, Helen resolved to explore her relationships more deeply. She took a step back, scanning the crowd with keen awareness, eager for the next opportunity to blend meaningful connection with delectable offerings. But what lay beyond this newfound intrigue, and how might her newly adopted philosophy challenge everything she had come to define as success? Helen stood behind the counter, her fingers instinctively reshaping dough while her mind raced through the implications of her recent conversation with Mrs. Langley. What had once seemed insurmountable, a blend of health and indulgence, now felt like a thrilling adventure waiting to unfold. With a renewed sense of purpose, she looked around the bakery, observing the vibrant interactions between customers. Each shared smile and laugh felt like a metaphorical ingredient, essential to her evolving recipe for success. Remembering the passion both she and Mrs. Langley shared for creating extraordinary baked goods, Helen began to map out ideas for their collaboration. What would a fusion of their styles look like? The room around her buzzed with anticipation. Helen could feel the energy shift as more customers engaged with her offerings, their interest piqued by her fresh approach to indulgence. Yet amid the bubbling excitement lay an undercurrent of tension. The pressure to balance her vision and her customers' expectations haunted her. Would Mrs. Langley remain on board once the initial novelty faded? And what if her loyal patrons resented changes to their beloved pastries? Helen grappled with these doubts as she meticulously sorted through ingredients, contemplating how each could contribute to her mission. Experimentation is key, she whispered to herself, setting her sights on crafting a new range of pastries that blended her healthier philosophies with the traditional favorites. The thought sparked a flicker of creativity. Perhaps a whole-grain crumpet, topped with a caramelized fruit spread, could be just the beginning. As the days went on, Helen devoted herself to her craft. She researched nutrition and flavor pairing, unraveling the complexities of what made dessert not just pleasurable, but also guilt-free. It was a delicate dance between honoring her customers' cherished favorites and introducing innovative twists. Each experiment was a snapshot of her growth, like an artist refining their brushstrokes to align with their vision. However, one day a familiar face walked through the door. Max, her former baker colleague. They hadn't parted on the best of terms, and Helen felt a pang as memories flooded back. Their collaboration had once been stifled by her need for control, and here he was, strolling into her bakery with an approachable grin. "Looks great in here," he remarked, his eyes scanning the change. "I can see you've been busy." "Busy reinventing," she replied, glancing down at the flour dusting her apron. "Join me for coffee? I'd love to catch up." Seated at the counter, Helen felt a whirlwind of emotions. Could this conversation reveal something critical about her own progression? Max had always pushed her, challenged her to value teamwork over individualism, all the lessons she had resisted in the past. This time, her heart raced with curiosity rather than apprehension. "Tell me," she began, her voice steady, "what do you think of the direction I'm taking?" Max leaned back, folding his arms, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, it feels like you're as much a part of this community as the pastries, but are you ready for the scrutiny? Not everyone embraces change." His words sliced through her hesitation, forcing an internal confrontation. What if, despite her aspirations to transform the perception of indulgence, her changes did not resonate? Was she prepared to defend her philosophy amid resistance? Balancing innovation and integrity suddenly felt like tightrope walking without a safety net. As the post-lunchtime lull settled in, Helen caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the glass display, both determined and vulnerable. She had begun carving a path not just for herself, but for an entire community redefining pleasure. Yet, with the stakes rising, she could not shake the unsettling feeling that every choice mattered more than ever. Would she stand firm in her vision, even if it met resistance? Or would she yield, further entrenching herself in her past mistakes? Just as she wrestled with these thoughts, Max's challenging gaze pierced her introspection, sparking a new resolve within her. "It's time to take a stand, isn't it, Helen?" With a steady breath, she nodded. The moment of truth loomed ahead. But could she embrace the uncertainties of her journey and forge ahead, despite the complexities awaiting her around the next corner? The following weeks unfolded with an exhilarating mix of creativity and anxiety that Helen hadn't anticipated. Each morning, she arrived at the bakery early, before the sun's first rays kissed the storefront. During these quiet hours, with the smell of fresh dough wafting through the air, Helen pushed herself to experiment. She began blending wholesome ingredients with beloved recipes, driven by the vision of a new menu. One morning, while trying her hand at a low-sugar lemon tart, she remembered Max's words. The scrutiny he mentioned loomed large in her mind. How would her customers perceive these changes? Would they appreciate her effort to elevate their favorites, or would they cling to the traditional versions they had grown attached to? Part of her wanted to forge ahead without hesitation, but the fear of misstepping lingered. This internal conflict intensified every time she entered the bakery, amplifying each beep of the oven timer until it felt like a countdown to Judgment Day. As she executed her ideas, Helen called upon her network of friends and family for feedback. With each taste test, however, frustration rose. Friends would exclaim, "It's good, but it's not the same," reinforcing her fears. The sweet familiarity they craved felt like a daunting shadow over her innovative vision. Each day, Helen would return home, staring at her reflection, questioning her choices. Could she truly blend health and indulgence without losing the essence that her patrons valued? By now, word of her creative experiments had spread around the neighborhood. One afternoon, as she served a new caramelized fruit crumpet drizzled with a light honey glaze, Mrs. Langley walked in. Helen immediately felt a mix of pride and apprehension. The woman had been a guiding force for years. Would she welcome or challenge Helen's direction? "Looks intriguing," Mrs. Langley commented, eyeing the display. "I see you're experimenting. How does it feel?" With decided honesty, Helen replied, "It's both liberating and terrifying. I want to push boundaries, but what if I lose our roots?" Mrs. Langley examined the crumpet thoughtfully. "Every great innovation holds a kernel of tradition. Remember, it's about balance. Find the way to connect the two." Those words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within Helen. She realized that she didn't need to abandon the beloved practices. She could update them. Inspired, she decided it was time to create a special launch event. She envisioned a tasting night where her core loyalists could sample her transformed recipes alongside the original favorites. This could be an opportunity for open dialogue, a way to ease them into acceptance, to share her journey in its rawest form. But doubts still lingered. What if the reactions were overwhelmingly negative? What if her efforts backfired, pushing customers away rather than attracting them? Yet she recognized that avoiding the confrontation would hinder her growth, both personally and professionally. As she mapped out her plans, Helen's excitement built. Inviting the very people who had shaped her journey to witness her evolution seemed fitting. It was time to transform those tentative thoughts into tangible action, to embrace the challenge ahead rather than shy away from it. That evening, as Helen pored over her preparations, she felt invigorated by the prospect of sharing this side of herself. Yet, with the excitement came the nagging question. Would her community embrace the change she so desperately wanted to share? Or would they turn their backs on a new vision? With an impending launch date looming, Helen found herself standing at a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown while hoping her wings would carry her gracefully. The moment to unveil her new creations was close, but would the response be a warm embrace or a cold shoulder? As the launch night approached, Helen's anticipation morphed into a whirlwind of anxiety. Each passing moment magnified her internal dialogue, amplifying her uncertainties. The bakery, a place that once felt like a second home, now echoed with the weight of expectation. Would her efforts to innovate resonate? Or would they be dismissed as a betrayal of the cherished traditions her community loved? Preparations for the tasting event became an obsession. Helen meticulously crafted invitations, carefully choosing words that conveyed both enthusiasm and reassurance. "Join us for an evening of exploration," she wrote, her fingers lingering over the keyboard as she hesitated, afraid of misrepresenting her intentions. Would her patrons really understand that this was not a departure, but rather an evolution crafted from their shared history? The day before the event dawned, bringing an overwhelming wave of dread. Helen arrived at the bakery before dawn, her mind a chaotic tapestry of thoughts. Her new dishes sat quietly in the display case, each one layered with possibility, but also fear. The low-sugar lemon tart, the crumpets, a gluten-free chocolate cake. Each was a testament to her hard work, but also a symbol of the gamble she was taking. Folding her arms, she gazed at her creations, feeling hollow despite her evident dedication. She picked up a crumpet, recalling the unyielding sense of familiarity that her original recipes had provided. That warmth contrasted sharply with the stark anxieties that enveloped her now. Her pulse quickened as she turned her gaze to the door, wondering who would walk through it tomorrow night. Friends? Neighbors? Critics? She took a deep inhale, grounding herself. Tomorrow is about more than food, she whispered to the empty shop. It's about connection. That single thought sustained her, parsed from the noise of her fears. The evening arrived swiftly, and Helen stood behind the counter, heart racing as she arranged the tasting plates. A soft hum filled the air as familiar faces began to filter in, each smile reminding her of a history shared through countless pastries. Yet their enthusiasm was laced with an undercurrent she could not shake, the invisible line drawn between the old and the new. As people gathered, whispers filled the air, mingling with the aroma of her baked goods. Helen forced herself to look each customer in the eye, but the anxiety bubbling within her made every smile feel strained. She overheard snippets of conversation, the familiar tones laced with skepticism. I hope she hasn't messed with the classics, and I don't know why she felt the need to change things. The moment she had rehearsed in her mind arrived. Time ceased as she stepped forward, heart pounding in her chest. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to show you what I've been working on, the heart of my long-standing love for baking, reimagined for a new era. Let's taste together. As she motioned for them to dive into her curated spread, she caught the eyes of Mrs. Langley, who gave an encouraging nod amidst the tension. Helen took a deep breath, ready for judgment. She watched carefully as patrons tasted her dishes, smiles flickering, brows furrowing, murmurs mingling with the sweet and savory notes wafting through the air. Yet between each response, she read the hesitations. Questions danced behind their eyes, leaving her questioning if she had gone too far. Just as a wave of uncertainty threatened to engulf her, a teenager stepped up to the counter, curiosity gleaming in his gaze. He raised the low-sugar lemon tart to his lips, biting in with an unfiltered enthusiasm that brightened the surrounding atmosphere. Wow, this is amazing! It's so much brighter than the last one. His innocent excitement rippled through the group, igniting conversations yet unspoken. Helen felt a new current of energy sweep over the room. This was her cue to listen, learn, and interact. Though relief washed over her, deeper concerns crystallized just beneath the surface. What did they truly think? Would that single compliment translate into acceptance of her vision? Helen wrestled with the complex emotions unfolding while navigating the tastes and voices swirling around her. As she poured her energy into the evening, she felt a shift in her commitment. This was more than about acceptance. It was about creating a dialogue, the very lifeblood that could bond her community to her evolving recipes. But as the laughter broke the tension, Helen felt a question pressing against her heart. What if, after years of nurturing tradition, she found her true voice only to have it silenced by the very people she sought to inspire? The space became charged, each interaction a potential turning point, as her heart raced with the possibility that a singular moment could define her future in this beloved bakery. Would she emerge as a pioneer, or would her fears sculpt her into a reluctant follower of the past? The atmosphere in the bakery shifted as patrons gathered around, their faces illuminated by the soft light and flickering candles. Helen wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions, each bite taken by her guests, strengthening the bond she sought to create while simultaneously intensifying her hope and dread. Questions formed like turbulent waves in her mind, crashing one after another. Were her creations being embraced? Would they merely be a passing curiosity, devoid of genuine appreciation? The teenager's enthusiastic exclamation had startled her, pulling her from deep introspection. His words echoed within her, yet the initial exhilaration began to wane as she scanned the room for discernible reactions. Conversations had ignited, but murmurings of approval mingled with hesitant tones. Helen forced herself to engage directly, stepping forward into the small crowd. "I'd love to hear what you all think," she said, allowing vulnerability to lace her voice. "I've spent countless nights perfecting these recipes. What do they make you feel?" A woman in her 40s raised her hand, her expression wary. "This tart has a nice touch, but it feels a bit different. Why change something that was already so good?" The question struck Helen like a sudden chill, but beneath the sting lay a flicker of understanding. It occurred to her that deep-rooted traditions were not easily unraveled. They were woven into the very fabric of their lives. This was not a matter of mere aesthetics, but rather the essence of their shared experiences. "I don't want to lose what we have," Helen began, each word deliberate and assertive. "But I also believe we can grow together. These changes aren't a rejection of the past, but a celebration of it, a way to welcome new flavors while cherishing the old." Her heart raced as she spoke, but she could see the lines of contemplation etched into the faces around her. This was not just broadcasting her ideas, it was a plea for shared understanding. The bakery was her canvas, and the patrons were all essential collaborators, each with a stake in this evolving narrative. "Have any of you tried baking gluten-free?" she asked, shifting the discussion dynamically. "It's tricky, but my goal was to create something that everyone could enjoy together, regardless of dietary needs." As she noticed heads nodding and a few smiles breaking through, the initial hesitance lightened, like a fog dispersing under sunlight. Discussions began to flow more freely, people stepping forward with their own experiences and key tastes to share. Helen found herself invigorated by this exchange of ideas, her anxiety taking preliminary steps back as connections blossomed. But amid this budding exchange, a shadow flickered at the periphery of her consciousness. Her mentor, Mr. Gardner, had arrived unnoticed during her moment of vulnerability and now stood at the back. His arms were crossed and his brow furrowed, an unmistakable look of judgment on his face. Memories of his critiques flooded her mind, filling her with a cold dread. With her heart sinking, she realized his opinions carried weight in their tight-knit community, a community he had championed for so long. The conversation grew loud and lively, but her thoughts were now solely focused on him. Did Mr. Gardner's look signal condemnation? Or was it something more, a challenge she needed to confront? Was he here to be an ally or an opponent? Caught between the affirmations threading through the bakery and the chilling uncertainty posed by his watchful gaze, Helen felt the pivotal moment swell within her. Clarity punctured through the din. She had to decide whether to retreat into the fears the past clung to or embrace this new chapter. But first, she needed to address him, to invite him to join in the conversation, transforming an antagonist into an ally. Holding her breath, she stepped toward him, each step a mixture of determination and anxiety, ready to confront not only her fears, but also the foundations upon which she planned to build her future. What awaited her in that interaction could redefine everything she had been working toward, lending new insights into the identity blossoming within her. Would she find a supporter, or would she face outright opposition? The moment hung tantalizingly before her, suffused with promise and peril alike. Would she step into a new realm of understanding, or discover the harsh truths laid bare by those she had hoped to inspire? Helen stood in front of Mr. Gardner, her heart racing as uncertainty and determination battled within her. The energy of the bakery buzzed around her, but in this moment, everything else faded into the background. "Mr. Gardner," she began, her voice steady yet vulnerable, "I'd really appreciate your thoughts on these new creations. Your opinion means a lot to me." His stern expression softened slightly, revealing flickers of curiosity beneath his crossed arms. "I came to see what all the fuss was about," he replied simply. But his tone carried the weight of years of mentorship. Taking a breath, Helen opened herself up to him. "I know change can be hard, especially in a place with deep roots like ours. But I believe there's a way to cherish what we've built while inviting new flavors into our lives." There was a pause, and the room grew silent as they all waited for his response. The weight of collective anticipation hung thick in the air. Finally, he nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Approaching it this way shows real growth, Helen. I can see the passion you've put into this." His endorsement, however subtle, felt like the frail tendril of confidence leading her into the light. Emboldened, Helen continued, "Tonight's not just about tasting desserts. It's about dialogue. I want folks to feel they can share their experiences with us, and in turn, we can grow together." Mr. Gardner offered a small smile, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that melted away some of her fears. "That's a solid approach. Good bakers evolve. You have the potential to be a leader in this community." Those words resonated deeply within her. This was not merely about desserts, it was about cultivating relationships, fostering an understanding of both nostalgia and innovation, and expanding her identity as a baker and leader. As the chatter began to swell again, a widening smile spread across Helen's face. The moment felt momentous, a turning point not just for her, but for her bakery as a whole. With an air of newfound confidence, she returned to the crowd, keen to foster the open dialogue she desired. Questions flew, ideas flourished. One by one, her patrons began to actively engage with her creations, finding their flavors dancing with unexpected delight. The edges of hesitation blurred away, revealing a community willing to explore an avenue of culinary togetherness. By night's end, the tables had transformed. Stacks of pastries had dwindled, the caramelized fruit crumpets and low-sugar lemon tarts became symbols of acceptance. Small groups gathered enthusiastically, exchanging stories of their own baking experiences, their words confirming Helen's secret wish. She wasn't just a baker, she had become a catalyst for expression. As laughter rang through the cozy space, a realization washed over her. Transformation doesn't always lie in maintaining the past, but in interpreting it in ways that resonate within a collective vision. Each voice and opinion she had encountered enriched this chapter, and there, amidst friends and patrons, she discovered a deeply rooted sense of belonging, a connection that redefined her essence. The evening closed, leaving her both exhausted and exhilarated. A long-lost familiarity had returned, yet it bore a new brightness, an echo of nurturing traditions while celebrating innovation. With her heart full, Helen stood at the threshold of the bakery one last time that night, feeling a robust confidence surge up her spine. "I did it," she whispered to herself, brimming with triumph. Finally, she had conquered her fears, blending her passion and her family's legacy into a brighter future. Her desire to impact others shone clearly, a profound personal achievement. Outside, the night air embraced her, cool against her flushed cheeks. Helen knew this was merely the beginning of her next adventure. As she stepped into the warmth of her home, a smile lingered on her lips, and she felt a solid foundation having been laid. A foundation rooted in connection, growth, and the promise of evolving sweetness. This was her moment. She was ready for it. As you reflect on Helen's transformative journey and celebrate her incredible victory, don't let this energy slip away. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.